If a disaster strikes and the grid goes down and communication towers are down and cell phones aren't working, have you thought about maybe an alternative, some other way of communicating outside of the standard phones and cell phones and even maybe radios? Maybe like a satellite phone? Did you see how expensive they are? They're really expensive. Well, I've got a little bit more cost-effective option that I think you might be interested in, so stay tuned and I'll show you and tell you all about it. Hey everybody, welcome to Cascadia Dispatch. I'm Casey, and today we're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about communication when the normal communication doesn't work, and specifically satellite communication. So why would you want to think about satellite communication? Well, in an emergency like an earthquake or a hurricane or a tornado or wildfire or something, a lot of the communication towers and infrastructure may go down or be damaged and may take a while to be repaired. So if a cell tower goes down, you may lose cell service. If phone lines are cut, you may not have landline service. And what infrastructure is still available is going to be overrun by people trying to make emergency phone calls and get communication out through what few wires and communication outlets are still available. Satellite is something that a lot of people don't consider, and so it's going to be an opportunity to get messages out, get in contact with people outside of the disaster zone, and not be tied in to those standard infrastructure pieces that may be damaged or inoperable during the beginning of the emergency. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I've heard about satellite phones, but they seem really expensive and complicated. Why would I want to bring this into my journey? And that's a really good question. Some people may not be at a point in their preparedness journey to really consider something like a satellite communication device of any kind. And that's totally fine. Just bookmark this video and watch for later, and in a few months when you get there, you queue it back up and you watch the rest of it. For those of you who have considered something like a ham radio, a handheld walkie-talkie or radio device of some sort as an alternative to a cell phone, satellites are probably something that you have thought about or dug into. One of the issues with satellite phones is they're really expensive. A satellite phone can run, $300 to $1,500 depending on the model to actually buy the phone. Plus you have a monthly service charge that starts, the lowest that I was able to find was about $30. You can run all the way up to $150 or $200 depending on what plan and how many minutes you want to have, and that's a monthly fee that you have to pay for in order to operate that device. So obviously having a satellite phone is going to be a great option. You can make a phone call when nobody else can. The problem is that from a financial perspective, you have to pay that monthly service fee regardless of whether there's a disaster or not. There's no good way to just turn a device on or turn it off from the subscription fee and still have it work in a disaster. So you have to keep that on, and you're going to be paying that monthly fee regardless of whether there's a disaster or not, on top of having to buy the device. Having one of them is going to be a little bit expensive. For us and our plan, we have multiple, 2 adults in our household plus other family members that are around. So in order to actually utilize those devices and have them work for us in our communications plan, we actually need multiple devices. So the expense gets multiplied if you need 2 devices, 3 devices. In our case, when we get to the plan, here's a spoiler alert, we needed 6 devices. It becomes incredibly cost prohibitive to just have that monthly fee without a disaster actually happening. Okay, so at this point in the video, you're probably wondering why it is that I brought up this topic of satellite communication and made it sound really exciting because it won't go down when everything else is destroyed. And then basically was like, oh yeah, but it's super expensive and nobody wants to do it. What's the point? Well, the point is that there's another alternative. The alternative are these devices called satellite communicators. At least that's how I've seen them referred to a lot online. And they're devices that utilize the same satellite network as a satellite phone, but are really for just doing text messages and emails. So you can still get messages out using satellites as your communication method, but you're not having to pay the really expensive voice charges that you would for a satellite phone. So of all of the satellite communicators that I looked at, the one that I picked for a few reasons that I'm about to get into is the Garmin Explorer Plus. You may be looking at this as saying, I don't know if it's a phone or a GPS or what it is. Well, funny story, it's both. It's not so much a phone, it's a communicator, but it's also a GPS. There are other brands out there that have satellite communicators, but they are specifically only communicators. You can only send messages with them, and you can only send them usually to an email address or a phone number, whereas this has that capability, but it also has the standard GPS features. So it's got all of the standard maps and things that you would want to see. It's got topographical maps, it's got street maps, it's got all kinds of that sort of stuff, as well as you can send messages between devices. And this is a really important feature that I'm going to go into here in a second. So for us on our plan, we have 3 families that live very close together, our family members, plus we have out-of-state contacts. Everybody should have an out-of-state contact, somebody outside of what would be the disaster zone to communicate with. But we also need to be able to coordinate in the disaster zone. So we picked up 6 of these, one for each of the adults at each house. So if I go to the grocery store and my wife takes the kids somewhere else, we always have one of these with us or in the car. So if something were to happen while we're out and about, we have a way of communicating. What's cool about these is they will not only send email and text messages, but they will also send messages to the devices themselves. Each device has a special ID, and so I can actually send a message to my wife's communicator, and she can send one to me. So we don't have to rely on the out-of-state communication person to relay messages. We can actually communicate directly. So when an emergency happens, all 6 adults in our family group can get on our communicators, and we can start messaging each other. We can send messages out of state and let everybody know who's okay, who's hurt, where we are, and then coordinate on the plans. Okay, so I just talked about how expensive satellite phones are, and these seem really similar. You know, they got to be comparable. Well, they are definitely one of the more expensive items that we have in our preparedness gear and supplies, but they're not the most expensive. So Garmin actually makes 3 different versions of this communicator. Actually, they make a 4th now. It looks like it just came out. But at the time we were buying this, there were 3. There's a little, kind of like a mini version that just does very few kind of communication functions. There is the SE version of this, which is yellow, and then there's the Explorer Plus, which is orange. The yellow SE version, we actually had a couple family members wanted to get the yellow one, and some wanted the orange one. And the difference is the orange one has maps already included in it, whereas the yellow one, the SE version, does not have maps included. It will still track where you're going. You can still put kind of waypoints and GPS coordinates. But if you want to just pick something up and see a map of where you are, this is the only version that had that capability at the time that we bought it. These were ranged from about $400 to $450 depending on where you get them and whether they're on sale. The yellow ones are somewhere between $200 and $250, $300 depending on where you get them. Sometimes they have them at Costco even. We actually ended up buying them at Costco because they were on a sale at Costco. And so we bought all the yellow ones and then realized that they didn't have the maps included, and so we took some of those back and swapped them out for the Explorer Pluses, so that at least every house has one Explorer Plus and one SE. At our house, we both have Explorer Pluses because I want my wife to have the same stuff that I've got, and if we're separate places, I want her to be just as capable. In some of the other houses where they're planning on leaving the SE at home and having the Explorer Plus out on the road, it makes more sense to have it that direction. You don't necessarily need all the mapping capability. So as far as the subscriptions go, the Garmin subscriptions or inReach subscriptions are about, the low end one that we have is called the safety plan. It's about $12 a month if you pay for it, or if you commit to a year. It's a monthly charge, but if you commit to a year, it's $12 a month. And that gives us 10 custom messages every month where we can actually take it and type whatever we want and send it off. And then unlimited, what they call kind of pre-done messages, where you have like 3 messages that say like, I'm okay, I'm headed to this location, or please send help. And those, when you put those into the interface and then you have those available, you can use them as much as you want. They're not super descriptive, but you can send them out if you want to. For us, we plan on using a lot of the custom messaging, and you can actually pair the device to your phone and use your phone then as the keyboard instead of using the device as a keyboard, which is nice if you're trying to send a longer message. But we have then preloaded into each of these devices all of our emails, all of our phone numbers for text messaging, and then all of the device IDs so that we can communicate with each other's devices independently. We can send broadcast messages if we want to, and then all of our out-of-state contacts are also included in that list. So everything is preloaded and ready to go. We don't necessarily need a phone to make these work or to get information to the people that we're trying to coordinate with. And then if an emergency does happen, because there's a per message rate of if you go over your allotted 10 messages. One of the messages that we plan on sending is to our out-of-state contact to call and adjust our plans on our behalf. So you can always increase your plans on inReach, and it doesn't seem like there's any fee to upgrade it. I believe there is some sort of a penalty if you're going to downgrade your plan. But in an emergency, we can then upgrade to the unlimited plan, and then we can use these as much as we want to and kind of keep the cost down for that period of time and then ratchet it back. The issue with this too is we're only paying $12 a month then to have these available whenever we want. And let's say we're traveling somewhere and we get a flat tire and we're out of cell phone range, we can use these to kind of make those sorts of emergency contacts as well. We don't necessarily only need some sort of major disaster to happen to have these be useful, which is another difference between having a sat phone where you're paying a really high monthly fee for a very few amount of minutes that you may or may not ever need and can only be a phone, versus this, which you're paying a smaller monthly fee to always have that capability. You can ramp it up if you need to. It has all the GPS features in it, so if you just wanted to use it as a GPS, you can do that too. There's also an SOS button, which in a disaster probably is not going to be helpful because everyone is going to be pushing their SOS button. But if you are a hiker and you're out in the woods or something and you fall and you need help immediately and you can't get a hold of anyone, you can push this SOS button, and Garmin has a service that will send help, and if you need to be helicoptered off of a mountain or something, they will coordinate that. You have to pay for it, but they will do that for you. And I guess if you're hanging off of a mountain, who cares how much it costs, just get the helicopter and come and get me. So that's why this has a lot more features than the other communicators. It also has a lot more features, I think, than a standard sat phone, and the value associated with this as a communication item versus a sat phone or just a standard communicator, I think is really important. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at these. I know they're not going to be in everybody's budget. It's not going to be something everybody either can afford or thinks is relevant, and that's fine. This is a little bit more in the advanced category of people down their preparedness journey. So think it over, kind of understand why you would maybe want this. Even if you're not going to get something like this, think about some other communication methods that you would want. If cell phones and landlines would go down, what is your communication plan at that point? And then leave it in the comments below. Does this seem like something that would be useful to you in your plan? Is there something else that you would like to have in your plan? Think about it. Like, subscribe, share. I think that's going to wrap it up for this part. If there's specific features that you have questions about, also leave them in the comments below, and I'll see if we can answer them or do a separate video kind of going through all the features of this. I really more wanted to just kind of focus on kind of how cool I think the idea is and how you might want to use them. But if there's specific features that you have questions about, leave them down below and I'll get some answers for you. Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye.